Good afternoon. I'd like to start this regular meeting for the MCA Governing Board. Today's Thursday, February 20th, 2020, and the time is 3 o'clock. At this time, I'd like to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Director Lohr.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Lee, for that. I got to say, I still make a double take every time I look down there at Joe without glasses on. I think he looks 20 years younger. At this time, we'll move on to item number 2, which is the invocation. Did we have an arrangement for the invocation today? Would anybody like to volunteer to do the invocation? Oh, fantastic.
Heavenly Father, we just come before you today, and we just thank you for this opportunity for our leaders of this community to get together and tackle issues that are at the forefront of this community. We ask you to guide their decisions, their thoughts, be with the staff as they present, be with the public as they begin to present, and just encourage us to have a productive meeting. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Eric, for stepping up. Now we'll move on to item number 3, the roll call.
Director Aguilar.
Present.
Director Creighton. Here. Director Espinoza. Director Hogue.
Here.
Director Lohr.
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Oliveira.
Here.
Director Pereira.
Here.
Director Silvera. Director Vialta.
Here.
Chair McDaniel.
Present. Thank you very much. Next, we'll be moving to number 4 for the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
I have a motion on the floor and a second. Are there further comments? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Sensing none, motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 5, public comment. Please form a line to the left. Don't elbow each other. So no comments from the public. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 6, which is the minutes, represented by page 8 in your packet. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Is there further discussion? Comments from the public regarding the minutes? Seeing none, with my first and a second, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 7, quarterly financials report. Information item, Nav Braggy, looking sharp in his new sport coat.
Thank you. This is something different we did. Staff is trying out a new format. The new format summarizes the MCAG MPO Fund, Measure V, TJPA, and RWA quarterly financials. The summary highlights the major revenues and expenditures for each agency. The first agency is the MCAG MPO. Well, halfway through the fiscal year, the MPO total fund and revenue expenditures are at 40% of projection. MCAG revenue sources are a combination of federal, state, and local funds. The 93% of all revenues for MCAG are received on a reimbursement basis. Contract services, federal funding, state funding, and ICAP are all on reimbursable basis. The major expenses for for MCAG, currently the overall expenditure is lower than budgeted. Professional services and expenditures is lower due to transportation studies that are scheduled to start in the second half of the fiscal year. Fixed assets and expenses are lowered due to the security enhancement projects, which is slated to start in the second half of the fiscal year. Legal services is higher due to some personnel issues. Outside counsel was hired to handle some personnel issues. Agency also hired outside counsel for the JPA bylaws. Any questions on the MCAG portion of it? So moving on to Measure V. As of 12/31, Measure V has received 45% of the total budget. There are 2 months delay in receiving the sales tax. However, the sales tax revenue is expected to reach its anticipated budget. Any questions on the Measure V? Moving on to TJPA. TJPA's total revenue is at 7% of the projection, and the total expenditures is 29% of the projections. 59% of TJPA's revenue is received from STA and LTF. At this time of the report, only STA first quarter allocation has been received. FTA makes up 30% of all revenues of the budget, which TJPA won't know the actual allocation until the second half of the fiscal year. On the expenditure, 81% of the budget is basically the cost of the service to operate the bus. The service contractor appears to be lower than budgeted due to the commitments of the new service provider later anticipated. The new service provider is slated to start in the fourth quarter. Any questions for TJPA? All right.
We're getting off easy, Nav.
Well, I got regional waste. So some good stuff. So regional waste, the revenues are at 60% of its budget, so their revenues exceed their budget halfway through the year. The expenditures is lower than budgeted. That's due to because staffing costs, there's some personnel that, there were vacancies during that time. There's also the principal payment, which $1.5 million is slated to be paid in the second half of the fiscal year. So with that being said, is there any questions regarding the quarterlies?
Looks like Director Silvera.
Yes, I just want to thank Nav I really appreciate your approach to putting this together. As I was going over it, if you look in your packet, there's multiple pages of little numbers that you can follow along, and so for me, you highlighting it and showing us the percentages. I called you on the
Legal services.
Legal services. I mean, that 94%, I know, right. Director Pereira, something like that, you caught your eye the last time. So I appreciate this approach to it. I think this gives us the information at a snapshot and gives us a real good indication of where we're at with stuff. And then if there's follow-up questions, you have the supporting information to go along with it. I know it takes you probably a little bit longer to put this together, but if you've seen these MCAG packets, they're pretty big. Correct. So it saves me quite a bit of time by being able to look at this snapshot. So I appreciate it very much.
And that was the Executive Director and I's vision is, give a snapshot, something short and sweet instead of just looking at numbers and it doesn't say anything. This actually tells a story.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe the correct term is those were big numbers in small print. Thank you, Nav.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Now we'll move on to item number 8, the Citizens Advisory Committee Report. This is information only. You can find that in page 39 of your packet. And presenting will be Ursula Stock. Welcome, Ursula.
So we meet, and I've been on the Citizens Advisory Committee for almost a year now, and I have nothing to report because this particular one we had no motions or anything. It was informational only. I'm new to California, and I want to say I'm very impressed with how all of this goes together and a little overwhelmed. But yeah, learning. So thank you all, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Impressed and overwhelmed. We're going to take that one. Please note. So thank you, Ursula. So now we'll move into the Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County. Item number 9, Transit Joint Powers Authority of Merced County monthly update. This is information only. Christine Chavez.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Christine.
I wanted to go over the ridership report for the month of January. You had the detailed information in your packet, so I'm just going to kind of summarize it. Overall, we had a 6.59% increase in our ridership over last January. You'll see, so in the month of January, we started the Merced College Student Transit Pass program, the Bus for You. That started on the 16th of January, so we had 5,866 passengers, which is a great start for half of a month, and you'll see that same decrease. Does this have a pointer? Oops.
A quick question. So these students that we have riding now, were they previously riding before?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to point to, was the general students. It decreased 69%, so from 6,000 to 2,000. Roughly, but we increased by more than that. So there are new riders that are riding, and there could have been just a general drop in ridership, but we did see a net increase in ridership. So
Wow.
That's really exciting. So I'll be updating you guys monthly on how that program is going, but I think it's off to a good start.
I got one quick comment. One of the things, if I could, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes, sure. Director Silvera, go ahead.
So something I wanted to point out, it was really interesting to me, is that the grand total of ridership going up, the 19 over 20 year, January, we went up by 6.59% of grand total ridership. And then this, intrigued me that your service miles only went up by a little, 0.6%, and your service hours went up by not quite 1%, by 0.9%. And so is that something that we normally see? Like, to see that much, a 7%, I'm going to call it 6.5–7% ridership increase, but you would think that would mean that there would be, it just means that more people are riding the fixed routes that we already have.
Yeah, that is true. And with the incentives that we're offering for Measure V to pay for a lot of fares, we're seeing that continued gradual increase in ridership. And with programs like the Merced College, we're just going to continue to see, empty seats filled. And so we haven't done route changes in quite a while, but you'll see that there was a bit more of a modification in the paratransit dial-a-ride service hours and miles, because we are having additional demands, but fixed route is generally fixed. The variance comes from deviations for on-demand stops for fixed route. So yeah, that's pretty typical to see a flat line. And it varies based on the number of days in the month, number of service days, type of service days, whether we have holidays or the like. Okay, and then I have a slide on the paratransit and general dial-a-ride. Oh, I'm sorry.
Director Villalta.
And could you just explain to me again how it works for Merced College Los Banos with riders?
Yeah, so with Merced College, Bus for Me or Bus for You, they can show their student ID. They go into the Student Services office, I believe, to get a sticker that's valid for the semester. When they pay their student fees, they're paying an additional $10. And then that fee gets paid to us at the end of the semester. And this is just a pilot program going through, I think it was through the summer. And so in August, we would renew it if it's successful, if you guys choose to move forward with that. So students are basically going to the student service office once they pay their fees and getting a free bus pass for the semester, and it's good on all fixed routes.
Okay, and the same thing in Merced City proper, they pay the $10 too?
Yeah, so it's anybody who's attending Merced College.
Okay.
Either
Anybody in
campus.
Merced County.
Right?
Anybody in Merced County. Anybody
Who's a student of Merced College?
Yeah, anybody who's attending Merced College is eligible.
Okay. And then they pay the $10 and then they can ride the bus because they're a student?
Yes.
Okay,
They
thank you.
can ride it with the valid semester sticker on any fixed route.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And this is the paratransit and general dial-a-ride. These are on-demand services by reservation or day of. And you'll see the increase in service miles and hours due to the increase in demand in some of our service areas. This is a lot more costly of a service than the fixed route. This has a much lower passengers per hour. So we are seeing a growth in that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but those are our numbers. Any questions?
Thank you, Christine. Anybody else have any? Oh, yeah. Director Murphy.
Thanks for the information on ridership. I may have missed it. Did you have some information on revenue increase or decrease as well? I know we've got the the Merced College revenue, how does that equate? Does it scale with the increase in ridership? The revenue also goes up with ridership, or is it not directly correlated?
Ideally, it does, but because this is just a pilot program, we haven't modified services at all to kind of consume those additional operating revenues. But NAV updated us on how revenues look based on our projections. I'm sure that they're incorporated into our budget with the increased revenue that we'll be receiving. So to answer your question, we aren't paying any additional money for these additional seats. They're essentially filling empty seats on our buses.
Right. No, my question wasn't on the expense side. It was on the revenue side. We're getting additional revenue, right?
Yes, for the pilot program, we get we'll have a flat fee, and I can't remember what it is. It's not a flat fee. It's based on the ridership that there was a formula we used that we proposed a number for the pilot program that based on the registration will get paid from Merced College to us. So that's set for this pilot period. So there is revenue there that we'll be receiving. And then once the pilot concludes in August, we're using this time frame to try to figure out what is the best mechanism to determine what the appropriate amount of revenue we'll need moving forward for the program to continue. And I don't know, I cannot remember what that range was. So I was looking at Mary Michael or NAV. That's what I was thinking. $150,000 to $170,000 for this pilot program is the revenue we anticipate.
And we're collecting that, just to further Stacy's statement, as a fare box recovery revenue. So just as the passengers pay the fare on the bus, they're paying the school, and the school's paying us for those fares, in theory.
That's helpful. That's helpful to hear the number. I don't need to know the answer now, but I'd be interested to know what that looks like in terms of percentage, since the ridership is reported in terms of percentage as well. You know, the overall ridership is up 6.7%. Is the revenue up something similar, more or less? It'd just be a good indicator to have as a board, I think.
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Director Murphy. Were there any other questions? Seeing none, so now we have Christine. Do you want to move on and do the operations and maintenance update?
Sure. We are finalizing negotiations with First Transit. We are very close. We are anticipating a spring turnover. So as soon as we have an executed contract, it's going to be 60 days from then. So we will let you know as soon as we have that. And we will I'm meeting with the drivers again this Saturday to update them on our pending status. But we're still moving forward. It's taking some time to get things right, but we're making it happen.
And then we'll move on to item C, the transit reserve policy.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, can I take the free fares before, and then we can talk about the transit reserve policy? The item 4.
We flip Sandy.
Sure.
Please. Thank you. So I want to talk about the free fare program. So we have Election Day coming up on March 3rd, Tuesday, March 3rd, and we have partnered with Merced County to offer free rides for anyone who is voting. So you can show your voting materials, or you can download from our website a bus pass that is like a voting bus pass. So on Tuesday, March 3rd, people can ride for free with their, presentable passes. And then that kind of brings it full circle. So we're getting into a new year, and historically, Merced has provided free rides throughout the year. And so next month before you, I'll be presenting just historical free ride days that we've had and some funding options for continuing similar programs. The funding options that we've used in the past are no longer available for this program. So next month I will be presenting some options.
I do have one question. I'll go last if no other questions. Okay. So when we offer the free rides to Yosemite, is there any way that there's any kind of funding? I know the federal government funds that particular free ride program. I wonder if there's a way that we could provide free bus rides here to the station for them to pick up a Yards when they go to Yosemite National Park on some of those holidays.
The funding they receive is actually state funding.
The one for the national parks?
Yeah,
Yards?
It comes from Mariposa County.
Oh, okay.
And it's a state funding, and it's apportioned by Mariposa County. And the one that we've used here for the reduced fare for Merced County residents is also state funding.
Okay.
But we've also had
It's a coordinated effort to because some folks, if they don't have a car, but be able to get a free bus ride to Amtrak or to Yards and be able to pick it up there and
Oh, I see.
go to Yosemite.
So we do have the FLAP grant, which is a federal grant, which allows us to have free service on free gate days. And then we have the reduced passes that Christine was mentioning. So the concept is to have an opportunity to connect someone via the bus to where they can grab Yards when Yards is free.
Correct. But that's the one I was talking about. The free
Right, the
pass
flap,
to
the
gate.
flap, the flap
Yes,
grant.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So that was federal funding.
Yeah.
She's been here 2 months, you know. I
Sorry.
can't believe she doesn't know everything yet. So we can look into that. We can look into
Yeah,
that.
that would, I just think that might be a nice coordinated effort because our ridership goes way up on those free gate days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at this time, no other questions? We'll go ahead and move on to item 9C, which is transit reserve policy. This
And
would
that-
be a big one if you.
This will be me, and I thought that was why we reorganized them a little bit. So if you'll recall, in the fall of 18, I brought forward a recommendation to the board that we needed to look at developing a policy around transit's operations reserve account. My motivation at that time was to create greater transparency around the use of the public dollars available to transit, and specifically the use of local transportation funding, or what we call LTF, as those funding sources align with our annual budget process and our long-term project planning. So the goal at that time was to really have this clearly identify what funds the transit agency has in its reserve account, and to have clear parameters around how those funds could be accumulated, how much could be accumulated, and what the mechanisms would be in place around how they would be accessed. And in particular, how those guidelines would interact with the board giving staff direction to access those funds. So prior to bringing that item to the board in the fall of 18, the operations reserve account existed and it continues to exist, but there just wasn't any limitation around it or real discussion about how we could accumulate funds, and also any guidelines on how we can access them. So the intention at the time was to say, we really could help develop greater transparency around the use of these reserve dollars that were already existing in an operations reserve account. So after some discussion back then about how much money was an appropriate amount for the reserve, it was decided, or I decided, that it was really in the best interest of the transit agency to push pause on that conversation until we had procured the new operations and maintenance contract, because we knew that we were going to have a cost jump, which we saw, and so we needed to have a better idea of what our annual operating budget was going to be after we took into account the increased cost to the O&M service provider. So with the board taking action, I think a few months ago now, on the O&M contract, we found that it was time now that we need to start talking about this policy around the operations reserve. So I kind of focused on these 4 questions. And the 2 I'm going to address today, but here are the 4, being why do we need an operations reserve, and what funding sources can be used for an operations reserve. And I'll tackle those 2 today as kind of a foundation or a framework to establish the conversation next month. And then next month, when we have some draft reserve policy language to be reviewing and discussing, that will address what's the appropriate percentage of the annual budget that should be held in a reserve for our new annual operating budget, and then how will those funds be allocated to, drawn from, and replenished back into that operations reserve. So that the 3 and 4 will be next month, and I promise I only have like 2 slides, I think, at this point. So why we need the operations reserve for TJPA? There's a couple of key points. One, transit doesn't have a general fund to fall back on. It also, the nature of how our funding sources work, as Nav had mentioned earlier, is it's a reimbursement-based funding system. So it requires that we build a budget and start our fiscal year with estimated revenues, and then the actual revenue amounts are not known until we're well into the fiscal year. And the revenue actuals that we receive from the federal and state sources are typically 8 to 10 months delay in receiving them. We've had periods of 12 to 18 months of a delay in actually when we request the funding and when we receive the funding. So as you can imagine, that makes a cash flow. There's some challenges around cash flow. So we do have the ability, so as long as this delicate cycle continues of kind of anticipated delay and then reimbursement, we can maintain and pay bills and keep the service running. So as long as two things occur, that in the event that two things don't occur, if the actual revenue that finally comes in when it comes in is lower than what we had estimated, a year, 6 months, however long prior, if that comes in at a lower rate, then we're in trouble. And if the funding delays, as I mentioned, we anticipate 8 to 10 months, end up exceeding what we have, what we're able to cover with our cash on hand, we're then in trouble. So when one of those two things occur, that's when we need to be able to rely on an operations reserve account. And the whole goal of this is to prevent service disruptions in the event of a revenue shortfall. And then the second point that I'll want to make, if you could go to the next slide, please, and this is the last one, is what funding sources can be used to have an operations account. So I know there's been some concern or some question around the use of LTF for this purpose, for the whole operations reserve account. But there's a reason why it's commonplace amongst transit agencies to use LTF to populate their reserve fund. So if you look at our transit revenue sources, which I have listed here, each of them are allocated for specific uses and have expenditure deadlines, except for LTF. So what that means is that for our current revenue sources, LTF is the only funding source we have that, as I can say, can collect dust, can sit in a savings account for when we need it, and it's not tied to a specific use or to a specific expenditure deadline, meaning we have to report that we've spent it within a particular window. So, but I think it's also important to note that looking at other transit agencies, while LTF is one of the most flexible funding source, other agencies have access to miscellaneous revenue that we currently don't have, and that would be, the fare box revenue, measure fund. Some have like specific measure allocations to their transit agencies, or if we were to advertise on buses, or if we owned property and collected rent, those would be miscellaneous revenue sources that would also fit in the category of being flexible enough to be in a reserve account. But we don't have any of those revenue sources at this time. So with that, I wanted to address these two, which, as we were preparing for next month's presentation, these two foundation questions, because next month, when we talk about the policy around how to access this account, what it should be used for, how much money should be there, I wanted just a quick refresher of why it needs to be there, and why you'll see LTF as the prominent funding source to help us have this safety net in place for our operation system. And
Any questions? Were we waiting for an applause?
yes, please.
Director Murphy.
Thank you.
So thank you for the presentation. This has been something that has been a focus for quite some time, and I understand the reason for patience with the new operator coming on and so forth. So I'm glad we're getting to that point. Could you preview a little bit what you're going to be proposing as the policy? I mean, I heard sort of the reason to have a reserve, but I didn't hear what it might be. Next month's item is going to be that. It's not going to be necessarily to say, here's the policy adopted. It's going to be an unveiling of kind of the staff recommendation of what we think it's going to be. Quite honestly, we are still talking about my instruction when Nav and Christine and I have been meeting on this topic. We are paying extra attention and providing extra scrutiny for
whatever percentage of our annual budget we're saying is the most appropriate. And that is kind of, I think, the point that's the most sensitive is how much money needs to be in there. And so I would be hesitant to put a number there because I think, we're honing in on between the three of us where our comfort level is, but we're not there yet. So I just want to be fair to the process. So next month and in our packet, it'll be there and we'll spend a lot of time on why. But I think we're within a good window, but we're not yet all on the same page on exactly what that number should be. So if you don't mind, if we could, but that'll be the core discussion next month will be how much and how do you access it? Or actually it's how much needs to be or how much we think needs to be there, and then how would that account be either populated or replenished. So if this board, if we had to use it for some reason, how would the normal cycle of LTF allocation appropriation be impacted or not impacted by having these dollar amounts in place?
Because previously, or even today, we don't have a real policy. That's what we're developing now on the reserve. But there was a significant amount of money that had accumulated, my understanding, in LTF, while at the same time we have roads that are crumbling in every corner of the county. And that's, the unspent LTF could go to road projects all over the place. So, that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, and I think you remind me of I think one of the two things. One, as this past year we've been spending a lot of time on this, I have a better understanding of how that accumulation occurred, and quite frankly, I think there was, and this isn't our current finance director, but the way those accounts were managed before as being a savings account for capital projects like the facility and whatnot, that those funds were sitting in a reserve, but they were actually allocated to projects, but that was like the holding tank for them, which we're not doing. That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing very distinct operations reserve and a capital fund to not have that happen. But the other point is exactly why I want to have a policy is to prevent an arbitrary accumulation of funds beyond what we need. We're
on the same page.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing staff's recommendations next month.
Great, thank you.
You good? Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Christine. Now we'll move on to item number 10 was our consent agenda. This is an action item. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Are there further comments? Oh, yes, Christine. This is concerning the consent?
No, it's not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is.
Oh, okay. I forgot to share the good news. We were awarded a grant for 3 cutaways, 3 of the smaller buses. So yay!
Okay.
New buses. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's a yay on the record. So I have a first and a second. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. Yay. Now we'll move on to item number 11, which is an action on property damage claim. Adrian Lopez, this is an action item. Christina. Hello, Christina. There's a button to the left on the to your right on the podium.
Okay.
A little arrow, and you can move it down.
On the front of it, not on the top.
On the front.
Just get on your tippy toes.
See it right?
Sorry. I don't need anything other than this. Am I good?
Okay, fine.
Okay. So what I am presenting today is a claim that came in through towards TJPA, but we are recommending that it would be rejected for starters, that it was submitted late past the statute of limitations. So that is the core of it, aside from that it would have typically gone to National Express anyway because it was a bus claim, aside from other things in there within the scope of the claim itself. So we are recommending to reject this claim.
Thank you very much. Christina?
I got a comment.
Yes, Director Silvera.
In reviewing this claim, I just want to point out to everybody that I reviewed this whole, I read the whole police report and everything, and I was confused as to why we would even have this claim, because my reading of it, I even had to have Director Pereira come in, and because I was like, am I missing something here? Because
No, we were just as confused.
the bus was just sitting in the turn lane and an accident happened in front of them, but they're suing us like it's our problem.
That was the merit piece of why.
Yeah, and so I want to say that I'd like to make a motion to emphatically reject this claim.
With enthusiasm.
So I have a first and a second. Are there further comments regarding this? Any comments from the public regarding this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the dais for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Motion passes unanimously to reject the claim. Now we'll move on to Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority. Item number 12, Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority monthly update. This is an information item. Mr. Eric Zetz, always dressed impeccably as well.
Thank you.
And you can move that podium up too if you would like it to be a little higher.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. Oh.
I feel like I'm at the University of Alabama.
No.
It's right there. Anyway, if you all, I won't go there. I'll leave it alone. Okay, so.
Go Tide.
There we go. All right. So I'm here to give you guys the just monthly update of the Regional Waste Authority. And so we're going to talk tonight about the tonnage reports for January. SB 1383 will give you an update on the jurisdiction status. Landfill gas to energy will give you an idea of where we're at with our CMAR process. And we'll also talk about our Saturday service update. For January, tonnages are up. Marty and his staff have been doing a great job. We are up about 1,100 tons overall. We are looking at about 200 tons gained, thereabouts 180 gained at Billy Wright, and then about 900 tons given at Highway 59. I know that there will be some good news in next months or the months after, but Marty's done some big work. But tonnages are up, which is a good thing. 1383. So we have completed our gap analysis with the jurisdictions, and by way of that, really what's happened there is that the jurisdictions have been informed as to where they stand in regards to SB 1383. And so they are still working with data that they might return back to HF&H. HF&H is now passing that baton off to SCS. SCS is now going to be looking and verifying all of the compost facilities that are in Merced County and who can take in commingled organics and food waste, and then from that come up with a plan as to where the authority fits based upon the populations. Each of the jurisdictions have a population. Based on that population, the law says you've got to divert a certain number of organics. We're there to kind of be a receiver, or at least have a solution to that. So that's where we're at with that. Landfill gas to energy. So, I'm sorry. Was there a question? Yes.
I should have known that.
Well,
Director Silvera, we'll have we're going to make this an item on our agenda from here on out.
Sorry, and I'm over.
I don't know. When you talked about their study and how many facilities in Merced County actually can take like food waste? I wasn't aware. Wasn't aware of any, but is there?
Sure. So we are actually meeting March 10th. The authority and we're meeting March 10th with an individual that has just been permitted for food waste and organics, and green waste, which is organics, and that is near the Billy Wright landfill right now. And so there is some opportunity there that exists, but I don't have that information for you right now. I'm waiting for SCS to compile it, and they're going to do it for the whole jurisdiction, and then come back and state, this one's permitted to do this one's not permitted to do this. Therefore, based upon the jurisdiction's range from that Highway 59 or Billy Wright, this will make sense or that will make sense. And so I shared with the executive director yesterday, we've got some really good news that will be coming up as it relates to Billy Wright landfill. And so we're very hopeful that Billy Wright landfill, as of yesterday, might very well look to be in a very good spot for 1383's receivables. But I don't have that fully worked out yet. But but we will have some options.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And I'm sorry, please stop me. I'm going through these slides fast, and I apologize for that. So if I need to back up, please let me know. Okay, so landfill gas to energy, this is the phase 1 project. This is construction manager at risk. So on the right side, you see phase 1 CMAR. Right now, the phase 1 process is to negotiate a contract with the authority, review the conceptual design and CEQA, prepare a budget estimate, and then the CMAR is only going to be compensated up to $10,000. And phase 2 will come back to you upon the completion of that work there for phase 1. The highlighted February 2020, that's where we're at right now. We have currently an intent to negotiate, and we're working with the executive director to get into an intent to award. And so we hope to have that here by March. Any questions on that? Okay.
You're on a roll.
Thank you. All right, so Saturday service update. You guys approved the 52 full Saturdays. Great job. With that, we are, January 13th, we started the recruitment. As I entered this room tonight, I heard there's some challenges with one of those recruitments, so that is ongoing. Radio ads have been released, and not that I'm tooting my horn, but I wanted to give you the great job. If you haven't heard my voice on the radio, you are about to. But this is the ad, and I will say this is Mary Michael's staff has made me look good. If they didn't do their job, I wouldn't be letting you hear this today.
Both the Highway 59 landfill in Merced and Billy Wright landfill in Los Banos are now open every Saturday from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. For more information about the Regional Waste Management Authority or what you can bring to the landfill, check us out on Facebook at MCRWMA.
There you go. So that concludes my presentation.
Did you pick the background music, or was that Mary Michael that picked it?
I did not. So
yeah. Any other questions? Okay, very good. So we'll move on to item number 13, another information item. Billy Wright landfill expansion options update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, fellow board directors. Item 13 is an informational item and comes before you as an update on staff's activities related to the investigation of properties suitable for potential future expansion of the Billy Wright landfill. It is important to note that exploring expansion properties for Billy Wright landfill has become multifaceted. It's quite involved and processed in that there are additional factors that staff has found with the site. Namely, access improvements would need to be had by the authority to access Billy Wright, and so we would have to look at some capital costs for access improvements. There's also 1383. If in fact an expansion of the facility requires a 1383 organic processing plant at Billy Wright, this is going to cost millions of dollars, not tens of thousands, but millions. So there's a factor there to consider with that. The authority's goal has been and remains to have a large contiguous property within proximity of the current Billy Wright landfill, and then assess the properties to determine basic necessities that the landfill can be met. Those basic needs are location. We've got to be accessible from Highway 152 and I-5, obviously. 15 minutes driving, that's where we want to be. The last time that Mr. Stayer gave an update to this group on the properties that were looked at. The properties that were looked at that time were properties that were actually for sale at that time. And so that's why the range was so far and great. In this case, we're really looking for contiguous and something that's going to work on the existing property and footprint. Elevation, upland sites with limited wetland or environmental mitigations, that's ideal. Water. Any proposed site, we need access to water. We need to have rights for water, for dust control, development, and domestic use. Permitting. Any property that the authority takes possession of needs to have fewer impacts related to permitting or obstacles in obtaining permits. Volume and cost. Obviously, it goes without saying, the larger the site, that's why the 600 acres site stands out. The larger the site, the better. Lower price per acre acquisition and develop expenses. In 2019, the authority engaged Tetra Tech consultants to create a matrix that evaluated properties, ranking them for further investigation. These property summaries were brought back to this board, and staff was directed to seek property appraisals for the 600 acre parcel north of Billy Wright landfill. Property appraisals were completed in the fall of 2019, after which staff began researching the suitability of the 600-acre parcel. Staff then found concerns related to water availability and the presence of environmental challenges to the site. Staff did reach out to the property owner of the site, 600 acres, and at the time that we reached out to them, the property owner let us know that they were not willing to sell and that they currently were entertaining a lease agreement of some sort on the property. In the fall of 2019, the board directed staff to continue to explore the 600 acres as potential expansion property for Billy Wright landfill, and to specify work to address the challenges related to environmental and water concerns. Today, I'm here to summarize the work that's been done for those concerns. One of the biggest environmental challenges to the site is the Endangered Species Act, which presents challenges for both permitting and development. In 2008, there began a new biological opinion on endangered species, namely smelt, salmon, and kit fox habitats. The Endangered Species Act requirement requires that this act be complied with in all new development. Any proposed development in this area will need to comply with the Endangered Species Act, particularly for kit fox habitat, as the species was identified in a previously conducted environmental impact report for the site. Highway 33 and Interchange 152 segregate kit fox populations, and any development would need to mitigate the segregated migration paths of the endangered kit fox. Another hurdle to the 600 site is as it relates to water. Lack of water presents challenges for water, permitting, and development for the site. The 600-acre parcel has high water salinity. It's a brackish ground of water. This is both good and bad for landfill because it means no development can occur. So a landfill doesn't want development next to it. So in a way, it's a good thing. But it's a bad thing if you're not in a water district. And so I will speak to some of the challenges that we dealt with in that. And this 600-acre parcel does not exist within the district. Since the 600-acre parcel exists outside of specifically the San Luis Water District, but really any water district, it is then precluded from receiving water transfers from neighboring San Luis Water District or any other water district for that matter. If you're not in a water district, you don't have the ability to transfer back what you're taking. The water code further prevents the transfer of water unless there exists sufficient water capacity from the transferring water district. And in the event of a drought, there are no water deliveries or transfers. There is an exception to this rule, which is having a pre-1914 water agreement. When we talked to the district, there was only one person that they were aware of that had that. This site does not have that. Or if you have well water and the well water is sufficient. If you got well water that's sufficient, well then you're good. But there's not well water here. This is salinity, high salinity water. So to make matters worse, the water tables in the area have gone down over the last 3 years. And so lacking sufficient groundwater, the San Luis Water District has not allocated water transfers since 2017. So it's highly unlikely that you would get water transfers if you could get some sort of form of approval for this site. The San Luis Water District also is not annexing new properties. We asked, can we annex this property? Can we buy it and then annex it? They said they are not annexing properties, and rather they're de-annexing properties. And so they're in a position of offloading to various neighboring water districts properties that they have. As a result, the 600-acre parcel would pose real difficulty to the authority in securing water for fire prevention and fire protection. It should also be noted that the property owner of the 600 acres has told the authority that he has an existing lease agreement on the property and is unable or unwilling to sell the property at this time. Another challenge for this parcel that staff found was access. Access was an issue. The current access at Billy Wright is from 152 and Billy Wright Road. With the 152 and Billy Wright Road, the access point does not have a designated left turn when going westbound. Obviously, you're in the number one lane, and so you are stopping number one traffic to make that left turn. So it is an unsafe turn lane. However, there is a dedicated right turn in the eastbound lane. And so in the eastbound lane, there is a dedicated turn lane that goes into Billy Wright. Billy Wright Road then travels southbound to 152 over the San Luis Canal and under the I-5 corridor until it rests at the Billy Wright landfill. That is the entrance as it goes there. The San Luis Water District maintains an access easement coming from the San Luis Drive and Vista Grande Drive. This is south of 152 and State Route 33 that follows the district's water path. So they have a water path that follows these dirt roads that comes from that intersection and goes out to points that are properties west of us that touch. The San Luis Water District, though, if we were to get access to that grant or to that deed of easement, the San Luis Water District would have to grant the authority that easement, and so that's a discussion piece there. When talking to the district about is there a possibility that we could get access to that easement and have access to it for our equipment, you'll have to realize as you drive out there, it's not flat like your maps show. And so the terrain is very high, very narrow, very steep. And so heavy equipment actually doesn't come through that way now. It comes off of 152 and goes through a back road, kind of circumventing some of the roads that are there to actually get to the Billy Wright landfill, because the current access point is not, at times with weather, not sufficient. So we would need to have access to that. We would also be looking at some grading work, to get the roads built up. Any access that we decided to utilize that had the district involved, such that it secures their utilities, their piping. If you drive the roads back there, it's got red markers that basically. Their pipes such that they take on a certain chemical that reduces contamination to the piping of the water, but it's all on their easement. And so Marty and I have driven it. Well, actually, Marty drove me through it, so Marty knows it very well. We would have to improve those areas. It would be costs associated with that, such that we did not damage the underlying pipes. So therefore, should the partnership be pursued with the district, the authority would likely be required to provide capital costs for the upgrade of the access roads in order to protect the underground pipes and address grading issues. So let's talk next steps. Staff has identified several parcels that do share a westerly boundary. They are contiguous to the Billy Wright landfill. They're within the San Luis Water District, and they offer potential options for access improvements initially. Staff will be seeking the services of, and let me back up, you have maps in your packet. Those maps, you have three, and the three maps, one is what was originally brought to this board when Tetra Tech had come on to survey the areas. Another property shows you ownership of where parcels are owned, and then another shows you lines of what's, and it's my drafting. I apologize if you can't read it right, but it is where the district's water pipes connect to. And so the thought is, if we can get in the district, I don't want to rule out that this 600-acre parcels isn't something we don't continue to pursue. Rather, I'm saying we do pursue it, but we be cautious as we go into this, because I asked the question, can I get into, if the board allows me to get into parcels that are in your district, and then I go north to get that 600 acres, can I move parcels in? And the district was very clear. They did not want to annex new properties. And so there's a balance there I've got to find. And so I just asked your permission to continue to research that. Additionally, staff is going to be monitoring the jurisdiction's efforts and compliance for 1383 for the West communities. We want to be mindful of the requirements that they'll need to meet as it relates to 1383. And if in fact I have to come to you with a proposal for a multi-million-dollar facility, which if you have looked at any type of processing facility of organics, it is in the multi-millions. That is something we would be looking at with Billy Wright, or could be. So I just want to be mindful for timing as to how that nestles in. Now, when the consultants continue their work and finish, we will come to this board, hopefully by summer, that says this is the recommended action on 1383. And my hope would be that recommended action would allow us wiggle room and play then to make a decision on property expansion if we really needed to make a decision at that time. Staff will be seeking the services of a real estate professional to identify property owners and to continue to initiate contact to gather additional information to bring back to this board so that you all are informed to the most of what we're informed. And just know that Billy Wright Landfill, I'm here to tell you, they are going to be a key facility. It is going to be a key facility in the region's efforts to comply with SB 1383. As authority staff continues to assist jurisdictions with local compliance, the authority is also exploring what processing facilities will be needed to handle the anticipated organic material from 1383, Billy Wright being the prime location for the West Side jurisdictions. Based on the research conducted to date and the history summarized before you today, there does not appear to be a viable solution to the 600-acre parcel with regard to their water challenges. The water is the one thing that really stands out as an issue for this. The access and things, we can try to work through that, but the water seems to be a one that we cannot get around, which would render this property unusable and unsuitable for the authority's expansion purposes until that water requirement is met.
Good question.
Yes.
When you talk about like water, how much do you need? Like how many acre feet does a facility that size need?
Yeah, it's null. So you wouldn't need a whole lot. And I say null to say you would only use it for domestic. And when I issued a building permit for any type of building structure, I've got to then water for plumbing to whatever serves that facility. Domestic for bathroom, hand wash, eye wash, that sort of thing. And so when we go forward with the permit action for the structure, that is when the water will come up and play a factor.
And so the actual water to water roads and all that, those type of activities, how much does a landfill typically use?
You know, I Marty?
It's roughly around, it depends on what's going on in there at that time, but on a normal year, it's around 10 acre feet. So
10 acre feet.
Okay. Farming.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so staff will work to continue to update this board on where we're at with this process. As I said, we're gonna retain a realtor to continue to assess the 600 acres and the additional properties that are around it. I'm hopeful to come back with some more information. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, Director Volta.
So it sounds like the 600 acres is pretty much impossible, but you're going to go forward with just your due diligence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the adjacent properties, they're more of a satisfactory usage for that area, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so the adjacent properties, how long will that extend the life of the dump with just the adjacent properties and not the 600 acres?
Right, so that's a very good question. I don't have a topo on the adjacent property, and I don't believe our consultant had completed a topo on the properties we're looking to the west. We never looked at those properties, so we'll make that determination and come back and let you know what that is.
So how many acres are there in the adjacent properties to the west?
I don't know how many acres that is. There is a sliver to the west that is rectangular, and that westerly property.
I'd call it 250. Is pretty.
Yeah, scaled by the map, looks 250 to 3 probably.
And it also depends on how many parcels we take into account, because if you look at the map with the yellow lines, that indicates how many different parcels there are. So we would need to kind of have some discussion around, you know, would it be all of them? Are there some? I mean, and we're starting that process by having the real estate professional kind of do some preliminary discussion around, you know, what the suitability is for some of these, and with our consultant. But we'd be looking at all of them, and when we look at potential capacity or the extension of the facility life, we'll take into account the whole lot, and then we'll be able to break that down. So we'll be able to have that more specific discussion. It's not 600 acres. I was thinking about 2 to 250. So sounds like that's what, but that's not an official number.
No, for sure. And I thank you, Stacy.
I'd like to know with that 250 and the current tonnage rate, how long that will extend the life of our facility.
Got it.
Okay, and also, do you need any other direction from us so this is not stagnant and it goes forward?
Not at this time, but thank you.
Okay, and during the summer, you will bring back a recommendation, just to be clear, and tell us if the 600-acre site is possibly doable, or the adjacent properties will be the site that we will be purchasing, and then also if we're going to have an organic plant. Is that correct?
All of that is correct, yes.
Okay, and so then this board will be able to make a decision and know kind of the cost during the summer as to which way to go. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Silvera.
Eric, the third map in my packet, it's, and I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen this map before, but it looks at some additional study areas. What is that about? Or was this like from a previous? Okay.
That was the previous study.
Are you talking this map here?
No, it says location E, location F, study area
Right.
2.
So I believe what this is indicative of is properties that the consultant had located and identified as being for sale.
Okay.
And so that was the primary target. And when it was for sale, that is what they went after. And that's why it's so far away. It didn't meet the contiguous. And rather, I believe that that's what left the 600 acre to be such a prime location.
It was for sale and within 15 minutes.
That is correct, yep.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That just threw me off a little
Thank you. Did Director Murphy have something?
So the water limitation is an important one. It's just the domestic use that would need to have the water that's sort of good enough for domestic use, but the other stuff doesn't really matter, right?
Right. So you have to use potable water, well water, groundwater, whatever. You got to use that for roads that the public travels on.
Okay.
So I cannot recirculate leachate water, or leachate that is the contaminant material water that's collected at the bottom of the cell. And so there needs to be water for the operations for that purpose. We would state, what we need to do for that. And my hope with this is that I could initially footprint and look at, and I'm going to work with the realtor to initially look at property that is in the district and try, and what I understand is the ownership of these properties, they're similar ownerships. The 600 acre owner owns some of the other properties to the west as well. And so as I get into this, if with the realtor's help, if I can start working this in an L that's upside down, I'm hopeful to have a conversation that suits our water needs.
So my question is, in terms of wellhead treatment, is that something that can remedy the situation, something that cities certainly do with our municipal wells when the water needs to be cleaned up? We have a wellhead treatment at the well, and then it sort of solves the problem. Is that a possibility here, or has it been looked at?
No, I don't believe it's been looked at, but the high salinity, I think, would be the main barrier for that, but we can look into that.
Just curious. I mean,
Sure.
it might be a solution.
All right. Director Pereira? And then you're next. After Director Pereira.
Can the brackish water that we're talking about, can that be used for dust control and compaction and all that stuff?
Yes, you could use that for dust control and recirculation and compaction. Director Pereira, that's a very good point. But we wouldn't have a finding in the permit for high salinity water. We would need to make a finding for development for water, and that would be the issue. But I think you're right. I think there could be an opportunity there.
And then, as far as, like, if we say that was the way we went and we have this brackish water, I think, Director Murphy hit on a good point of, because the usage for the office and restrooms and that's going to be so limited, it might even be cheaper to have a tank and haul water in.
Right.
But the other point to Mike's about cleaning the water, we have some resources right here in Merced County that you could call you could discuss that with. So offline, if you want to ask me, I can give you a couple of companies that are doing it now.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey, Director Villalta.
So you had mentioned that the property was under a lease agreement and the owner said he can't get out of it. What was that comment about?
Right. So the owner said to me he was not interested in selling the property at this time and that he had someone under contract, under a lease contract. And he actually emailed it to me, so I've got it by email, but it was something to that effect.
So where does that leave us if we go through condemnation?
I don't believe we would take on any lease on the property if we condemn. I mean, it would be ours to hold. But I'm not aware. I haven't confirmed that that's actually existing on the property. The owner made the statement. I'm conveying the statement. When we get the realtor involved, we could find that, what that lease is.
Okay, because I mean, if there are too many mitigating circumstances that are going to stop all this, then and leave us in court for years because this person has a lease agreement someplace. I don't know if I want to go down that path. I mean, we take the path of least resistance and come up with the acreage that we can come up with and adjust the tonnage therefore.
Okay.
All right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Eric, nice job.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to item number 14, authorize the Household Hazardous Waste Management Service contract. This is an action item. Kyle Loretto. This is on page 79 for you following along in your packet.
Down just a little bit. Good afternoon.
See how nice that is?
And it works great. The item before you is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for household hazardous waste management. The authority last released an RFP for these services in 2015. At that time, we selected and contracted with Clean Harbors Environmental Services. They've provided the HHW services up until the expiration of their contract on January 31st of this year. In October of 2019, staff released a new RFP with 2 proposals being submitted for review in November. Following review of both proposals, Clean Harbors received the highest score by the evaluation committee. Clean Harbors was selected based on experience of both the company and its personnel, as well as their past achievements and performance. Under the new contract, Clean Harbors will provide HHW services at 6 scheduled events, 1 quarterly at Highway 59 landfill, and 2 community cleanups in Los Banos. We request that you authorize the executive director to enter into a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for HHW services in an amount not to exceed $100,000 annually.
Thank you, Kyle. Are there any questions on this item? Any comments from the public regarding this? We'll bring it back to the dais. What is the pleasure of the board?
Motion approved.
I have a motion and a second. We'll call for the... Okay. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Now we'll move on to item number 15, approve the Solid Waste Association of North America California Legislative Task Force 2020 Regulatory Platform. I said it fast on purpose, so
Did well.
Eric, you're back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So the Solid Waste Association is a national group. It is something that's got an organization in every state. There are chapters in every state. Each of the SWANA chapters in each state, they only have 1 per state. California has 3 chapters per its state. In every state, there is one not local transportation fund. This is now legislative task force. And what this group does is it's going to be a policy driver driver for, we're going to go out and just a quick 1383, they wanted yellow trash cans out for food waste. And so this is the organization that fought the yellow trash can to the 200-page policy document. Some of the policy drivers for this organization that they will be looking at is increasing recycling, composting, and solid waste, climate change, renewable energy, SB 1383, single-use plastics and packaging, lithium-ion batteries, vaping waste, CRV, California redemption value, conversion technologies, and the like. You have this packet in front of you. This is an 11,000 member agency, and it's got it's very, very good. I will just say it that way. For my part, I sit as the chair on this legislative task.
I was getting ready to comment on that. It's led by a outstanding person that we may have
Director McDaniel, Chair McDaniel, thank you. But with that, I cannot move forward as supporting or purposing any of the policy directives unless I have your board's support for these actions. And so there is no financial means to this, but I'm going to be supporting legislation on this topic. Matter of fact, at the next meeting, you may or may not see me, depending upon, because next meeting is our legislative action at the state capitol. So maybe Marty can help us out at that meeting. But I haven't got the executive director's approval for that just yet, so I'm going to work on that. But so again, a policy document, I need your approval to be able to say yes or no. Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority is in line with no yellow trash can or not. And if you said no, I would omit my vote to those topics. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Eric. I'm looking for a motion, or does anybody have any extra questions or comments? I do have a motion on the floor.
Second.
And a second. Any comments from the public regarding this item? Seeing none, I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to Merced County Association of Governments. Item number 16, Caltrans report, information only. Tom Dumas, how are you?
Sir, how are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Auburn is the team.
Oh. You didn't like the Go Tide?
My brother went to Bama, so I had to go to Auburn, so it's just a natural thing for us. Couple of things quick. Please put a tentative date in your calendars for March 17th. That is the last date they gave me for the ribbon cutting for the Livingston 99 project. Hopefully that'll follow through.
St. Patrick's Day, yeah.
Yeah.
We might be a little livelier than normal.
That could be. That could be. The governor signed Executive Order 23-20 telling Caltrans that we need to work with the local agencies and cities and counties to try to find locations for homeless sites for temporaries. We have our own group already working for that, so any of the cities and agencies that are out there that need to work with us, please get in touch with us and we'll try to see what we can do to find locations for that. Our homeless encampment continues to be going around throughout the district cleaning up. I don't know the actual schedule for where they come around, but they work with the local agencies so they can do their outreach to the social services groups to help those folks. But anyway, so we'll be looking for locations either on our property or under the freeways or whatever they have that could work for that. Just a note, if any of your agencies have infra grants that they're going to apply for large capital projects, those are due February 25th. We have a new Department Deputy Director of Planning and Modal Programs up at headquarters. Her name is Jeannie Ward Waller. She used to be a district director for a short time in District 2. She was also in charge of our sustainability program, so we look forward to meeting with her. The Route 99 business plan update is going along in our offices. The draft is coming along well. Just to let you know, so far they've counted 110 projects up and down 99. Out of those, they've got about 29 of them have already been completed, but 81 are still coming, so it'll always be busy.
And 67 are in Merced County?
Yeah. I don't have that number. Maybe you have a better number than I do. I can't attest to that one. Active Transportation Program Grant Cycle 5 is coming along. They have issued a call. It's supposed to start around November, is when to expect it, with applications due in June of 2020. So your folks could work with our local assistance groups if they have any applications there. Other than that, the last thing is we have changed our Office of Business and Economic Opportunity back to the Office of Civil Rights. So if you're trying to get a hold of somebody in that group to discuss an affair, it now has a new name, so that's where you'll find it.
Great. So if they answer with a different name, it won't be the wrong number.
That's true.
Are there any other questions for Tom?
I knew there'd be something.
Oh, yes, Director Pereira.
Just a heads up, this past week, I got a message on Facebook about the intersection of Highway 33 and 3rd in Gustine. Something about the lighting and the kids crossing to school. So I'm going to be out there Saturday and take a look at it. So just if you happen to be that way, take a peek. And then if I
drive out there, if you have an opportunity, if you want to forward me that message, I can get that over to a PIO and they can investigate that for you.
Okay. I haven't even talked to Joe about it. It's so new. So anyways, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom, very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, we'll move on to item 17, was information discussion only. Does anybody have any questions or comments on these items? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to 18, transportation planning and Measure V update. This is again an information item. Stacy Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The item 18A should read CTC Commissioner reappointment in the event that there was any update, which there is not, on the pending reappointment of the CTC Commissioner or Vice Chairman Paul Van Konijnenberg. We did send, as I know the agency did, and several of you sent letters of support for his reappointment, but there's nothing to report there. A quick thank you for everyone that was able to make it out to the Campus Parkway ribbon cutting at the end of last month. I was it's unfortunate I wasn't able to be there, but I saw all the pictures, and it's one of those things that will live on in perpetuity, and I'm just sad I wasn't part of it because it looks like it was a big moment and looked like a great celebration. The Highway 152 Safety Task Force has a meeting coming up next week on the 24th in Los Banos, and while I mention that, I'll also say that next week is our it's quarterly or sooner executive management partnership meeting between Caltrans District 10 and MCAG. So Matt and I meet with Director McElhaney and his team, and we go over kind of just a status of things. So that meeting is happening next week. So if you have anything in particular that you would like us to raise in that meeting, aside from our regular projects and updates that we've always been talking about, if there's something unique, let us know. So Director Pereira, if there's anything that comes out of your visit this weekend, let us know, and I can bring that up to Dan next week. And then the West Side Commuter Bus Study, I just want to note that the proposals are due tomorrow, so we'll be able to get an update on what kind of a response that we received from the consultant industry for that opportunity. And I think that's it. Matt isn't here. Oh, one more thing is the high-speed rail. I sent this in the board update, I think last week, but high-speed rail, the High-Speed Rail Authority did release their the update to their 2020 business plan last week, and it does recommend the Merced to Bakersfield initial segment. On Tuesday, MCAG joined many people from Merced County, some of you here at the dais, to speak in support of that update. So we also sent in a letter and some written comments, and so we'll be following that, and we're working with our Valley colleagues to do the same. So the next meeting is in the Los Angeles area in March, and then in April it will be in Fresno, where they are scheduled to adopt the plan. And that is it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Stacy. Any questions or comments? Okay, then we'll move on to item number 19, the Federal Safe Rule Update, another information item. Stacy, you're still on.
Thank you. These are one of those items where when Matt says he wasn't going to be here, he's in a leadership program with CalCog, so it conflicted with today. This item is just a complicated one, but it's not new. It's just an update. So the Federal Safe Rule was something that we've been talking about for a while, and this board, I think about a year ago, weighed in with a letter to oppose the federal government's action to revoke California's ability to set its own vehicle emission standards and air quality goals. So that's largely been how we have been able to meet our air quality conformity standards is by, as a state, we had this waiver that we could make stricter standards. So our cars had to be more fuel efficient and have lower emissions and everything. That waiver has been revoked. And what that means is you can imagine in the planning world, all of our planning documents, our RTP, our air quality conformity documents, have assumptions that are allowed based on that waiver. Now that the waiver isn't there, if we needed to open any of those documents up to add a project or to move a project up in schedule or anything like that, if you have to get in and tinker, you now have to address this gap because you can no longer claim that waiver and those activities that you were allowed to claim to meet your air quality conformity. So what that means is, for right now, this is probably going to take a while to sort out, and we don't know what the solution or resolution looks like at the end. But it could mean that future road and highway projects would be delayed until all of that planning to correct the assumptions we have built into our documents, and it's not just us, it's everyone in the state, are addressed. So for anything that's already in our long-term plan, so, the projects that come to mind, Atwater Merced Expressway, Campus Parkway and the Livingston 99 widening project, those projects are well underway and they're fine. There's no delay. But if construction came for our future projects that are kind of coming onto the horizon, like the AME project and Pioneer, anything that has to do with capacity increasing, new lanes that would increase traffic, if this mess isn't sorted out before that, there could be delays to those projects going to construction. So this is just, you'll hear us talk about this just so that we hope we never get to that point, but there's a couple things that could trigger where we either have to do a pretty intensive redo of our planning documents if that's the way we know we need to go, or we're going to have to figure out, how we as a region and as a state will be able to meet our air quality standards.
Very good. Any other questions? Seeing none, that was an information item. Thank you, Stacy. Now we'll move on to item number 20, authorized contract for hosted voice over internet protocol, VoLP phone service. Nav, you got it.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, our current contract has expired. Now we're month to month with our current provider. MCAG received 7 proposals. Of the 7, we interviewed 4 on January 17th. The proposals range from $9,900 to $106,000. Those who proposed the lower end range had some additional costs that still need to be configured on top of the monthly cost. Once the interview was concluded, the incumbent Fortis Telecom was ranked the highest by the evaluation committee. The first year cost is about $26,500, and the option year 1 and 2 is the same. That's a 9% increase, which equates to $2,200 a year. This service is divided amongst 3 agencies: MCAG, TJPA, and RWA. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Nav?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Second. Did you have the second? Yeah, I think Creighton had the second. Sorry, he was a little quicker at the trigger. So I have a first and a second. Are there any other comments regarding this item? Comments from the public regarding this? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Nav. Now we'll move on to item number 21, which is Citizens Advisory Committee Representative Appointment. This is an action item. Mary Michael Rawling.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Here today seeking your appointment for a vacancy we have on the Citizens Advisory Committee for a representative from the water/irrigation industry. Ron Price, who you honored for his service a couple months ago, served his 2 4-year terms, so after 8 years, we're giving him a break. Mike Jensen has applied, and this is before you for your consideration today. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mary Michael. Are there any questions?
Move to approve.
I have a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, once again, this is
Just push Mike.
bottom right. It's just a name on a piece of paper to me. Does anybody know Mike Jensen? Have we vetted Mike Jensen? I mean, I don't know anything about the man. And these names come to us, and we're voting for people we have no idea who they are.
I'm sure many of the directors know Mike as well. He serves in their public affairs, public relations, government affairs department for Merced Irrigation District.
And he has been an active member in our One Voice program in the past. I had the pleasure of being his colleague in the congressman's office years ago, so I'm familiar with him. I think he would serve well in this capacity. But this is not the first time this kind of discussion has happened, so it's kind of, I'm saying it out loud so we can have the conversation about maybe what else we can be doing in the information packet to maybe help familiarize the board with the candidates. But I think of all the candidates we've ever entertained, I'm most comfortable with Mr. Jensen, just based on having worked with him for the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, that answers my question, yeah.
Okay. Director Creighton.
I know Mike. His credentials are outstanding. But I agree with the other board member that I think that we could do like a little bios on these when we do the agenda item next time, so that they're familiar with what's going on. Because if you read his bio, he's well credentialed and he's going to be a great asset. So, but I agree, we need to familiarize everybody up here with who we're picking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe a photo and bio. Okay, are there any other? I'm sorry, I'm kind of.
First and second, right?
I do have a first and a second.
Second was
I made the motion.
yeah.
Silvera and
Second came that side.
No, you didn't get a second. That's
I'll
me.
second it.
Okay.
Director Oliver.
And I'm on this side, so I think that's okay.
Okay. So did the clerk get the first and the second? Are there any other comments from the public regarding this item? We'll bring it back to the dais with the first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. Moving right along, item number 22, appointment to the 2020 Ana Maria Fuentes Scholarship Selection Committee. This is an action item.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I'm sure all the directors are familiar with this annual process that we're embarking on to award a scholarship to a Merced County High School senior who's demonstrated academic excellence. The application period closes next Friday, February 28th, and in March we will convene a small committee that consists of a representative from your board, representative from the Fuentes family, and a couple members of our staff. So we're looking for that recommendation from your body today. This scholarship is funded through donations, both from employees as well as outside donors, and there are sufficient funds in the scholarship account to make this award this year, as well as fulfill our previous commitments to past awardees. So looking for direction to your board, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
And if I could just add, Mr. Chair, the commitment here is a few hours, one day, to sit with, it's typically the family member, Anna's family member, and the staff, whoever makes up this committee. You spend usually 2 or 3 hours, I would say, maybe a little more. It's a popular program, but it's just one time. You review the applications and you deliberate and come to a recommendation.
Right. I can say I've served on this committee, and it was very rewarding, and it's a pleasure. Has anybody else here not done it? You have served it. I'm kind of looking. I think it's an opportunity we should spread around. Mr. Silvera?
I nominate the chair to do it.
I've already done it, so that's why I'm,
Well, I mean, you said you had such a great time. I think you ought to do it again.
well, I think Lee's done it. We usually like the newest member of the board to serve in that capacity.
Have different people do it every time.
Right.
Yeah.
So Director Aguilar, Director Laura.
So your motion failed.
Director McDaniel.
How many do you need?
Just one person.
All right, I'll do it.
I nominate Director Hogue.
I'll second that.
So you had, I think we had a unanimous and a second, so she will communicate, okay.
You'll hear from our staff. Thank you.
And I actually think Director Lohr's done it twice, haven't you?
I think so. All these people have done it all these times. You do it like 5 times a year or something?
No, it's just once.
We've been doing it for a long time.
Okay, so I have a first and a second. There was a nomination made. All nominations are closed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Usually we have one opposition. No, just kidding. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're moving on to item number 23, Subcommittee on Board Composition Options, Alternatives for Consideration. This is an action item. Stacy, do you want the board to report out, or are you reporting out, or the committee to report out? Are you reporting out?
I was just going to set things up and then turn it to the committee. So in September of 19, the board provided the chair with the authority to appoint members to a subcommittee to discuss the alternative structures to MCAG's board composition. Those appointments occurred in November, and they were directors Mike Murphy, Scott Silvera, Lloyd Pereira, and Joe Oliveira. The first meeting was held in December, and at that time, staff was provided direction to research approaches that have been taken by other councils or associations of governments that would add additional seats to the governing board for cities specifically. And the subcommittee met again on January 27th to review the data that and the staff analysis that has been attached in its original form in your packet. At the conclusion of the second meeting, it was established that no additional meetings would be needed, and that there would not be a consensus recommendation. So it was decided that the individual members of the subcommittee would speak to the alternative options that they were championing or proposing for the board's discussion. So staff at that time was directed to provide a summary staff report, which is the staff report dated February 13th from me to the board. All of the material that was provided to the subcommittee, which is some data around both geographic considerations and population considerations and different ways you could look at the distribution of representation based on those two factors. And then also it was determined that any of the subcommittee members who wanted to provide the background information or a proposal on their specific position could provide that to me and would be included. And Director Murphy did so, and it is included in your packet as attachment 2. So I won't go, unless the subcommittee members ask, I won't go into any detail on the data and the staff analysis unless there's a request to do that. I'm happy to. But I do just want to summarize what you have on page 190 of your packet, which are the options for consideration. So between the 4 subcommittee members, there were 2 subcommittee members, Pereira and Oliveira, that had taken a position of taking no action, and that would require no vote of this body and it result in no change to the existing structure. That's option A. Option B was adding 4 additional seats for the largest cities, and Director Murphy will be explaining that alternative. Option C, which was adding 4 additional seats for the largest city, and so it's 1 to the largest city and 1 each to each West Side city, and that will be discussed by Director Silvera. And then option D was a weighted voting system that is something similar to what we see in Fresno COG, and Director Murphy will talk about that. I will just say, just because I mentioned there was a discussion around what other Valley COG or what other COGs do or what their boards look like. I think that in looking at the Valley COGs as a sample, there wasn't a one right way to determine based on population or to balance the county representation. There was a collection of different ways, but there were 2 structural commonalities that were across the board. And one was that there was always a representation for all cities in the county with at least 1 seat. So everyone always has at least 1 seat for every city in the county. And the second was there was always some level of representation of the county, and that was either with 1 county representative or 1 county supervisor all the way up to all. So it was 1, some, or all, but even that varied. So I can go into more detail, but I can also turn it to the subcommittee to discuss their options. So I look for that direction.
Yes, Director Murphy.
So first I want to thank the 3 other subcommittee members for giving this attention, and I appreciate the time that went into it. My expectation was not that we would come out with a unanimous direction, but that we would instead roll up our sleeves and spend some time outside of our general governing board meeting where we could drill down on this a little bit more and then come back. So that's what we're doing now. I think Stacy summarized well the direction that came out of there with 4 different options. I want to walk the board through 2, and it's the very last page of the packet on attachment 2, and really just draw your attention to the table that's highlighted is the very last page. And essentially what this alternative does is it identifies sort of the imbalance, sort of the disconnect between population and representation on this board. So, for example, currently the unincorporated areas of the county are 34% of the population, but have 45% of the vote on this board, and it's largely at the expense of the city of Merced, which has 30% of the population and 9% of the vote on this board. And so there are other cities that are underrepresented as well, including Atwater and Los Banos. And so the alternative 1 here in that table is to add 4 additional seats to this board, not to take away any seats from anyone here, but it would add 2 to the city of Merced, 1 to Los Banos, and 1 to Atwater. And what that does is, if that's the case, there wouldn't be any jurisdiction that is underrepresented by more than 1.5%. So, for example, even though Los Banos would get an increase in representation, they would still only be underrepresented in terms of population by 1.48%. And the county would be less than that, 0.6%. Really, even under this scenario, the jurisdiction that is still grossly underrepresented is the city of Merced at 10.6% in terms of population. So that's one alternative that I discussed in the subcommittee and that I wanted to bring forward to this board for consideration. The second one, which is called Alternative 2 here on that last page, is to essentially keep the board composition the same, but there would be a double weighted vote, which is not a new thing. As Stacy mentioned, this is sort of the model that happens in Fresno, where you would have to have a majority of the individuals that are on this board, and the composition would not change. It would still be an 11-person board with 5 county supervisors and a representative from each of the cities. But in addition, you would also have to ensure that the votes that approve it represent a majority of the population as well, which seems fair to me, so that really, what I'm focused on is trying to bring our representation more aligned with the population that we all represent. So thanks for allowing me to present that, and I do look forward to the opportunity to discuss it after everyone's had an opportunity to sort of present theirs.
Thank you, Director Murphy. And then Director Silvera, do you want to?
Yeah, unless Director Oliveira or Pereira wants to state their point, I thought it was pretty obvious. So I don't know if you needed to go into any further explanation.
Well, let's go ahead and go with yours, and then
Perfect.
We'll let them speak on theirs.
So what I did is when I came into this, I think let's be real, there's not an appetite nor enough support for this board to lose Board of Supervisor seats on this board, right? So I said, okay, so, and I look at this, and I come from what I hear and see out there. There's two distinct issues that they're very different issues that folks have. One is as the mayor just pointed out, feels that Merced is underrepresented with having 30, and I want to call it 31% of the vote and only 20% of the board. So that's that.
Population, I think is what you're talking about.
Okay, of the population, and okay, percent of board.
We're 1 out of 11, so it's 9% of the.
Thank you. Okay, so that's his point, and then as Mayor Vololta's pointed out, he just feels like there's it's unfair east side versus west side representation, and so I said, okay, at that point we had our first meeting and we had kind of given staff direction to kind of get us some more information, but nobody had really put a plan out there. And so I thought about this plan, and it says, well, how do you address both issues? And so what I came up with is proposing that we give the city of Merced an extra seat, and that gives them more representation, and then giving each of the cities on the west side an extra seat. And so the way that I kind of look at that is that makes it a 15-person board. But then I was I will say, shocked to find out that other COGs really don't care about the odd number. They I've always kind of thought on boards and commissions, you try to keep it an odd number so that there's not you don't have a tie vote, right? Other places, they have 16 or 14 or whatever their number is. So, but with me sticking with keeping that odd number, so that increases you from an 11-person board to a 15-person board. And in doing so, it really answers the question to the east side, west side thing, right? Because now it kind of makes it like it's 7.5 and 7.5, because the District 4 supervisor being that half vote, they kind of represent half on one side, half on the other side. So you would have two folks from the city of Los Pianos, 2 from the city of Dos Pals, 2 from Gustine. That puts you at 6. The District 5 supervisor puts you at 7, and then the District 4 supervisor puts you at the half. And so, do I think it's perfect? No, I don't think it's a perfect solution, but I think that it's the only solution that has been brought forward that answers the best that you can both questions. Merced gets more representation. The cities already have more votes than the counties, but this gives them a few more. And I really, honestly, I think that why not try it? What's it going to hurt? And I know some people have frustrations with transportation and Measure V. Well, just so you're all aware, this doesn't change that. This doesn't change the makeup of the East Side, West Side projects committees. I don't have an answer as far as with the language where it has to come back to the MCAG board for approval. Does that take into consideration if that MCAG board changed, or would that still be those 11 original members? I don't know the answer to that. But listen, I think it's, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to change a whole bunch, but at least it's a solution to a problem that seems to be out there. And so I get it. If you look at it, you say Livingston, Atwater, they're like, well, we got the raw end of this stick. We're only going to keep with 1 vote. But I'm trying to address the east side, west side issue. And so, and it's really, if the cities want it, they already had the ability to have more votes than the county, but now if they got a few more and they can all line up, well, then they I don't know. I still think at the end of the day, you get stuff done by diplomacy. But what I will tell you is I think that this is a good solution. I think it's at first I went into the board meeting and told everybody in our subcommittee meeting, No, I did not go crazy. But it's just, let's offer a solution up, and because whatever happens today, I want this to be the last day that we discuss it. Either we go with a new idea, or and then we're done. Because I don't think going back to the table and discussing it again is going to change anything. So I'd love to answer anybody's questions if they had any.
And then Joe or Lloyd, do you guys want to discuss why you wanted to keep it the same?
Yeah, sure. And both of us might talk because we may have some different ideas. So I tried to approach this logically. And so really we have three entities that we sit on the board for, right? We have the solid waste, we have the transportation and roads, regional roads, and then we have Measure V. Well, actually, I guess we have four, right, if you break it down. So my question to Director Murphy was, if we're going to change something, we don't just change stuff because we think it should be different, right? What's the reasoning, and what's the, and so basically it come down to what's the harm? What example do you have of where the current composition causes harm to one of the jurisdictions? And specifically it was to Merced, because he's kind of been driving this. And his only example was on the East Side Measure V committee. This is not going to affect the East Side Measure V committee. That's in the statute of the measure. If you go back to the bus, nobody's brought up any measurement or logic or spreadsheet of where there's something wrong with how the bus gets allocated or done or whatever. Then you go to the landfill. Well, nobody complains about the makeup of this board as it affects the landfill. So then you come down to the last one, which is regional roads. And I'll tell you what, population has nothing to do with regional roads. And the county has the vast majority of the regional roads. So anyways, if you break it all down, the system we have now works. I cannot see where there's harm that would be changed by a change fixed by a change in the makeup of the board. And so that's why I'm just pretty set that where we are is logical. Could you imagine you try to fit 4 more people in this room, and then you look at fitting 4 more people in Dos Palos, you look at fitting the other jurisdictions. So from a logistic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And so I hope I conveyed all my points. I didn't write them down. But anyway, so that's why I'm think that the current makeup works just fine and doesn't need to be changed.
Thank you, Director Pereira. Director Oliveira?
Yeah, I pretty much echo what Supervisor Pereira said. I'd rely more on the road miles. If you talk to anybody in the county, what do they want to see fixed? It's their roads. That's what everybody's worried about. Their roads. I don't care, and I don't care what other counties, what the makeup of their board is. I mean, and if you add more seats, there's the public's not going to like that on the west side. They're going to say, oh, another power grab by the evil empire over there on the other side of the river. The big metropolis areas, they're leaving us in the dirt again. And that is something I've been fighting on this board since I've been on, is to get working closer together, because at one time Gustine was very anti other side of the river. It was like 2 different counties. And I even took this idea, talked to the staff over there, and I talked to the rest of the council, and they say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they say, and another comment was, yeah, there goes Merced again, trying to pull a power play. And that's more in the past history, and that's what's going to be perceived. My feeling is, I'm more concerned about the road miles and the population, because thus, and the outlying areas probably drive over the county roads more than the people in the city of Merced or Atwater or Livingston, because we come to this side of the river quite a bit, so we're on those roads all the time. And that is the major concern in the county, I think, by the public, is the roads. So our approach is, it's not broke, don't fix it. Don't need to fix it.
Thank you, Director Oliveira. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions from folks who aren't on the hold on, Murphy. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, I wanted to respond because, my name and the city of Merced were brought up a couple times here. Let me clarify and set the record straight on a few things. In terms of the point about what harm has been done or could be done, and talking about the East Side Regional Committee, that's only part of the story. I mean, really, and this is what I mentioned previously, and I've mentioned it a few times, is that all those things come back to this board. They all come back to the governing board, right? And so it is an issue, right? And to say that, well, there hasn't been harm yet, and sort of just rely on the benevolence of the county is not something that is sort of the right way to operate government. It should be representative of who the constituents are. Now, it's frankly, it's disappointing to hear things repeated like the great metropolis of Merced. Really? Or the evil empire. I mean, come on. And so, this came up in the subcommittee meeting, and I said, Joe, tell me what you're talking about. Like, what has happened in this room where Merced has been a beneficiary? And the things that were brought up was, well, you have UC Merced. We do have UC Merced. We all do, right? And it's near Merced, right? It's UC Merced. It has zero to do with the decisions that we're making here on this board. So to equate the fact that we get everything because we have UC Merced is just not a fair analogy. And the point that I would make, that I made in the subcommittee, is that Merced has actually been last in line for the things that have been done at this board. So for example, the widening of Highway 99, it's happening everywhere else except Merced. Livingston's next, which is great. We're happy for that. But the last place in the county, the bottleneck, the city of Merced, right? The project that is happening in Merced is the Campus Parkway, which had nothing to do with dollars or resources being allocated from this board. So really, this narrative about everything happens in Merced there's no correlation that I see between what the decisions that have been made here and sort of disproportionately benefiting Merced. It's just not true. Now, Director Silvera made a point about adding additional representation to Dos Palos and Gustin, which actually exacerbates the issue that I identified, where we've got two cities that have 2% of the population each, and combined they have 18% of the vote on the board, and you would essentially double their representation. So I appreciate that you're sort of advocating and doing your job and sort of do it with a smile and put that forward, but it's really not tethered to anything that has to do with representation of the number of people, other than some sort of an arbitrary division that we've made, that even though there's not equal representation and population on both sides of the river, that somehow there has to be sort of an artificial construct that does that here at this board.
Yeah, I just want to, and the widening of 99 isn't directed by this board. That's directed by Caltrans. So,
well, we talked about that. We've actually had some input on the widening projects.
Right. Well, we had to, but Caltrans brought it to us, and we had to okay it.
It doesn't happen unless there's approval here.
Right, but they're the ones who direct to us first. I mean, they haven't come to us over there because we're all for widening 99. I mean, this.
I know we all are. I'm just saying that we're the last one. So to say that there's sort of some correlation, like Merced sort of jumping in front, like it's just not happening.
Right. I just want to be clear that it was Caltrans that directed where that project was done. And
I want to be able to respond back.
Okay.
It just so then, and listen, I told you my plan wasn't perfect, but the same concerns that you have for that there's unfair representation based upon the population of the city of Merced. There's folks on the not everybody, but there's folks on the west side that have that same concern that they're not being fairly represented, that all the votes are on the east side and the east side can always outdo the west side. So at least with my solution, you give the west side some more representation, and you're right. I know logistics, it would be tough, but I don't think that's a reason not to vote for it. We can squeeze in a little bit tighter. And then I just want to go really quickly, if I could just say on option 4, the weighted voting system. my big issue with that one is that I represent everybody in District 5, even the ones that live in the city of Los Banos, even the ones that live in the city of Dos Palos. And with that weighted voting system, my vote would only count for 8,000 of the 56,000 people I represent, and I'm not giving up that representation of those folks. So I just wanted to put that out there. Option 4 just is not a good one for me.
Okay, what I want to do now is folks who are not on the committee, if they have questions concerning what was presented, to ask the questions directly. So, yes, Director Villalta.
Well, last night our board had this as an agenda item, and we voted for option C, the one Mr. Silvera presented. But I think the awareness of this board with the voting procedures, I think, is somewhat refreshing, because I think there are many members of this board that realize that the voting structure is not fair. And one only need look at the flow of money over the decades to see where the project money has gone to.
Was this a question for Mr. Silvera's presentation?
This is a statement.
Okay, because we opened it up for questions.
Okay, I'm going to make a statement. Okay. So this day has been long coming. And I look at some of the comments that have been made. If it ain't broke, well, it is broke, because Los Banos, Dos Palos, and Gustine, if Gustine wants to be part of it or not, we're not getting anything for the fixing of our roads over there. We're the only undivided roadway on 152, and we had to demand a safety committee meeting with Caltrans, because we weren't getting anything from this group. The idea of Measure V and the East Side West Side Committee, you know where that came from. That was my idea, because I was scared with MCAG, if that passed, my fail-safe for MCAG passing was to have an East Side and West Side group.
And who carried that for you?
Pardon me?
Who carried that idea for you?
Los Banos. You helped, yeah, you helped, but Los Banos was the one who put it forward. And that turned out to be a godsend, because I did not want this body in control of all that money. I did not. And so now we have at least a chance to, and it's worked out so far with the Measure V funds. But I don't see us getting any other funds, because what's going to happen is you have to finish AME. You have to finish AME, and you have to finish. You're not going to leave from Castle to the college unfinished. You're not going to do it. So I realize that. I mean, it's like the Godfather movie. I'm sorry I killed your relative, but it was just business. And you have to understand it was just business. And I understand over here. I understand it's just business with you guys. But the business has affected Los Banos. The voting structure has affected Los Banos. So it's refreshing to see that people are thinking that the voting process is not fair. I know Livingston has suffered, and I know Antwater has suffered at times. We've all suffered. But, the way it's set up now, the East Side has all the cards. We all know it. Los Banos can never do anything, or Dos Palos or Gustine can't do what it needs to do when the voting structure is on the East Side. So that's why trying to make it a little bit more fair, it would work. And if that's not convincing, let's just do discovery and look at all the money that's been spent over the decades and see where it went. If you got the guts to do that, do it. Let's see where all the money's gone for MCAG, for roadway and other projects. Let's look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for the presenters? Okay. Director Laura?
Thank you. I agree with Directors Pereira and Oliveira. By going off of population, you're saying that I don't represent, as District 2 Supervisor, I do not represent residents in the city of Merced, and I too am not willing to give up that representation. And as the board, we take recommendations from residents as well as our volunteers on our committees. So by saying that we make the sole decision, yes, we make the final decision, but we also receive feedback from all those groups. So I want to uplift the participation that our Citizens Advisory Committee and our TRB and all of our advisory groups provide their influence and their decisions that highly influence this board's decision as well. So when we're looking at population, this here is inaccurate, and there's enough representation up here for the county residents. So I agree with Pereira and Oliveira.
Dr. Murphy.
Well, since you brought it up, let me say it on the record. You don't represent the citizens of Merced City when it comes to roads. You simply don't. How so? There hasn't been a single Measure V project in your district. Not a single one. You take credit for Measure V projects that happened in downtown Merced with city money. So let's just get it out. You don't represent the residents of the city of Merced when it comes to transportation.
Yes.
So your statement is there are no Measure V projects in District 2. My response is there are in downtown Merced. Right. Am I taking credit for it? No, I'm not. So when you look at how Measure V is divvied out, right? Measure V is divvied out not by us.
You misunderstand how Measure V works, if that's what you think.
No, I believe you're misunderstanding, because your statement is there are no Measure V projects.
There are regional projects
in District 2. And my
come from the county.
Is there are.
They come from Merced County that are appropriated from your board.
So now with that clarification.
But the county can't do projects.
Oh, let me tell you, McKee Road could use some road work. Lake Road, Golf Road.
So
those are all in the county. So those are all in District 2.
Jacked up too. I mean, if we're going to start picking who's got.
Oh, I know. That's why we're spending money on them.
So when
so to say that are the downtown road projects in the city of Merced, that has everything to do with the city of Merced spending its Measure V dollars, and exactly zero to do with you allocating the dollars under your discretion. Let's be clear.
So under my discretion and the Board of Supervisors' discretion, when you look at the mileage of roads that the county has, we're not allocating the county's pot equally among all the districts.
That's exactly my point. The allocation is zero in District 2.
No, it's at 4%.
And when you look at
Measure V monies in District 2.
I asked for a report from county staff that came over, and there were 0 projects done and 0 projects in the queue. So I have not seen 4%, but my math, it should be at least 20% if you've got 5 supervisors. But my understanding, there's been 0. No, well, it's through the county. We did it through the matrix. It's allocated by miles. It's indicated by road travel. It's on the matrix, and I think everybody has used that matrix. Okay, I'm just going off the information I got from your staff, and I got a matrix with road projects, and there are exactly 0 in District 2 from the county. So I didn't want to bring that up, but you bring up this issue of representing the city of Merced, and frankly, you don't when it comes to transportation. Well, I can say without defending that whenever we look at our Measure V allocations and updates, I've seen 4% for that district. I've seen 4.4% for my district, and it was relevant to the miles we have in percentage in the county. Just saying that the residents of District 2 in particular carried a heavy load in getting Measure V passed. A lot of the supporters for Measure V live in District 2. So with that analogy, do we say SB1 passed, so the Bay Area and Los Angeles should get all the money and we shouldn't get any? I mean, I'm just saying, it's the same analogy. So are there any
So I was rudely interrupted. I'm not going to finish my statement because I wasn't given the opportunity, and I would rather say that I don't represent the residents in City of Merced.
And to be clear, you weren't interrupted. I was recognized by the chair to speak.
Really mid sentence. Thank you.
Director Aguilar, did I see I saw some movement
Yes,
over there.
just quick comment in regards to option C, where they'll be adding additional seats to the west side cities. Obviously not in support of that. Just, I think it creates a bigger divide and more hostility in regards to the, west side, east side. So definitely Atwater and Livingston wouldn't be in support of that. I'm assuming Atwater wouldn't either.
I think Director Creighton's given consideration to the group.
Do you have something to say, Director Creighton?
Oh, do I have a lot to say? First, there was some discussion by Supervisor Cervera about let's not bring this back, let's not talk about it anymore. I think we're getting through some really good discussion, and I don't think the goal is to stifle communication and discussion, because a lot of things are coming out of this. Second, to even look or consider option C, where Gustine and Dos Palace would add anything, is laughable, because the city, I'm going to call it the city of Winton, the city of Delhi, which the county won't incorporate, they should be sitting up here too. They have over 10,000 each. So LeGrand and Planada probably outpopulate Gustine and Dos Palace combined. That's a disproportionate representation that it's obvious. It's obvious to everybody. There's no east-west divide. I think if you did the analysis, that you'd see that it's being fairly allocated. That's the MCAG's job, the board's job. A lot of excitement, a lot of tension here, but I'll tell you, this all stems from the supervisors not willing to give up one seat because they want to keep control of what they're doing. And, it's difficult as a mayor of a city when you have 5 votes you have to overcome every single time, and there's always a one swing vote because the west side wants to do something, so Gustine's going to go with the supervisors. We're beat every time on something. So why don't we do this on a population base and the supervisors give up a seat? If you guys are so transparent and so comfortable, then trust us all. I don't think that when you have a east side, west side, that it's a legitimate argument, because the city of Atwater, Merced, Livingston, Delhi, and Winton, that's your population for Merced County. That's it. That's the core. So you want to take that away and just shift it over to the west side. I've never done anything but help the west side since I've been up here and been on the city council. I don't ever anticipate the city of Atwater taking an adversarial position against Los Banos, Dos Palace, or Gustine. Those are all beautiful communities. I think that we need to focus the discussion on the supervisors giving up one seat. I don't think it's a big deal. I think that option needs to be explored. The subcommittee presented this. It's called on here as an action item. I don't think we need to kill this, or I'm cautioning you guys that it's the supervisors that need to have one chair reduced. And I think Pereira said 15 people up here, that'd be a quagmire. You go to Dos Palace, where are you going to put everybody? So why don't you guys compromise and give one up?
So you said that, but you guys have if you're going city county, you guys have one extra vote. You get
well,
one
I tell you what,
and,
I recommend that
on,
our supervisor give his seat up. We'll forfeit ours. We'll be the leaders. I trust the other supervisors to look out for us.
Supervisor Pereira.
So I just want to remind everybody back to the reason why I think that the board should stay the same. And that is because there's really no issues, at least that have been brought forward with the landfill. There's been no issues brought forward with the bus. Measure V won't change. The fourth item is regional roads, right? And the county, out of 576 regional road miles, if you read your packet, right, there's 382 state highways, there's 194 locally maintained regional roads. So Merced County has 510 of the regional road miles. 66 miles are in incorporated cities. And that's really what we're talking about. And I just ask you to bring it back. It's not about, I don't know, anything else really. It's not about the board and your way. It's about the board and what we're responsible for and if we're effective or not. And I just you know, there's got to be a reason to make a change. And I just don't. I think it's well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Director Villalta.
Well, I surely don't agree with that, because if you, what I said, go back and do the analysis of the MCAG money that MCAG has had control of, and you show me what's been done on the west side. So I don't agree with that. I had one other proposal, and what I thought of is to give each supervisor a 60% voting share. That would be 5 times 6 would be 30. That would equal 3 votes. So they still have their 5 people on the board, and each one of them would be a 60% voting share, and all the cities stay the same. So the weight of the power still stays more with the city, because, and in reference to the voting structure, everyone's going to get a carrot. So the board votes, and the supervisors usually vote in unison. And so what happens is they have 5 votes, and if they throw out a project to Gustine, Dos Palace, they're putting them in a position that they're going to say yes, or they're going to put me in that position. I have to say yes. So there's your 6 votes, and there's your approval. So that's not fair. So if the cities were to look out to each other, and we had 3 votes by the Board of Supervisors at a 60% each, that would be the fairest way to do it. We're not adding any seats. Everybody maintains. Everybody stays with their 1, and it's a 9-vote board, and then the cities have more of a share. But like I said, go back and do the analysis on the projects and see what you come up with. I've been fighting this battle for 10 years. Oh, you know, you're number 1. Yeah, you're number 1, all right. And then all of a sudden a new board comes in and I'm not number 1 again. And then the money's taken away. Twice it's been diverted. And don't tell me anything different. I don't want to listen to that.
Mr. Chair? Director Creighton was next.
All right.
Go ahead.
Director Purr. He's yielding.
Okay.
Nope.
I'll go. Pryor said there's nothing wrong. Why are we changing it? I don't believe in that philosophy or analysis. Merced County, since 1968, we've been the best at being the worst. Highest unemployment, highest uneducated, highest sick people, asthma, welfare, foreclosures, poor roads. The list just goes on and on. It's time to make some changes. And let's get these county supervisors out of control completely, so we can set our own destination. I think the Mayor of Los Banos is right on the money that this is the time we need to stand up and do something.
Any other comments?
Can I say something?
Director Hogue.
Thank you. Okay, well, I would like to have 2 representatives for Dos Palace, but I know that's not feasible. First of all, I'd like to say that we have allocated money to UC Merced. So with the methane gas thing or whatever we were doing with the landfill. So there was money put to UC Merced. So we are giving money to projects that don't have to do with roads for Merced. And we all voted on that. I'm probably one of maybe 4 people out of here that have a regular job, that go to a regular employment. I've taken the day off to go to these meetings that end at, or they begin at 3, and I'm taking a sick day today in order to be here, and I have done that probably 5 times. I don't appreciate all the arguing that happened. We're supposed to be working together, cities and counties. If we can't work together and come up with solutions, then this is my proposal. Are you ready? Pay for all of the roads in Dos Palace to be repaved, and I will give up my seat, and you can have your board. because I get so tired of arguing about stupid crap that doesn't have anything to do with anything. Okay, your roads aren't getting fixed. Neither are ours. We need to come up with a solution, not argue about how many people are sitting up on these boards, because I'm not getting paid to be up here. All right? This is taking 3 hours, well, actually 8 hours of my time. And I don't appreciate having to waste my sick time to come to these meetings and argue. So there it is on the record. That's why I don't say anything. I'll let you guys argue, but I'm done with arguing. Fix my roads in Dos Palace. Take all your regional money or whoever's money and fix them. There's not that many. And you can have my seat, because I'm tired of arguing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hoag. Director Silvera.
Mr. Chair, if there are no further comments, I'd like to make a motion to approve option C.
So I second that.
I have a first and a second. Are there comments from the public regarding this motion?
Just go over option C again.
Make sure I called the right one for it. That was the option that I presented.
We'll go ahead and have a public comment now before we... Oh, sorry. There you go.
Okay, good afternoon. Actually, I was late today for the general public comment, but I wanted to take the opportunity. It's a very good conversation here, and I think it's a very important issue for everyone here. But there's one thing, while I was analyzing everybody's point of view, there's different people talking about mileage, miles of roads, there's different people talking about population, but no one has talked about or considered which cities or county areas are the ones that are bringing in the funds. Is Livingston bringing in so much in taxes and tax revenues, Atwater, Merced, Los Banos? So, you know, I think it's only fair to consider that as well, you know, and just be equal. I mean, that is something I haven't heard from anybody here. You know, where are those funds coming in from? So it's like, you know, it's like you're asking me to give money to the whole county, but I live in one area and it's going to go somewhere else. You know, me personally, I want my tax money to be invested in the area where I'm at. I want, you know, so maybe that is something to consider before you guys go into a vote. Thank you.
What's that?
Just a point of clarification, it's simple majority to prepare an amendment. This wouldn't actually constitute the amendment. I just got that clarification.
Yeah.
It's a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, because we're adopting this right now, so yeah, I'm with Director Murphy on that. It would need to be a 2/3 vote.
Technically speaking, everyone is slightly right here. It does need to be a simple majority to direct staff to prepare an amendment, but ultimately it will require a 2/3 majority vote. So if it's not going to get that, the preparation of the amendment is largely ceremonial.
Okay, so I have a first and a second. Are there further comments or questions here at the dais? Do we need to restate option C, or is everybody with the understanding?
Chair, if I would be glad to restate it.
Well, let me ask the dais. Do we need it restated?
No, we just need to know which one it is. It's Silvera's.
Yeah, the option.
It's Silvera's. Option C is Silvera's.
The one I brought forward.
Yes. Okay. So at this point, then we'll call for a vote, but I'll call for the roll call vote.
Director Aguilar?
No.
Director Creighton?
No.
Director Hoag?
Yes.
Director Lohr?
No.
Director Murphy?
No.
Director Oliveira?
No.
Director Pereira?
No.
Director Silvera?
Yes.
Director Vialta?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. So then we will look for another motion for another option. Yes, Director Murphy. Sorry, I looked at you. I thought.
Yeah, I'd move to adopt option B, which is, I think that's right. That's my first alternative, right? Is option B. So that's adding the 4 additional seats, 2 for Merced, 1 for Los Banos, 1 for Atwater.
Second.
So I have a first and a second. We'll call for the, well, actually, let me ask for comments from the public. Seeing none, we'll do any more comments here at the dais. We'll call for the vote. Let's make it a roll call vote.
Director Aguilar?
Yes.
Director Creighton?
Yes.
Director Hoag?
No.
Director Lohr?
No.
Director Murphy?
Yes.
Director Oliveira?
No.
Director Pereira?
No.
Director Silvera?
No.
Director Vialta?
No.
Motion fails.
With the same vote. So now we'll be looking for a motion for the next option.
I make a motion that we continue this with the direction to reduce the board by 1 supervisor and bring that back.
Right, it's not an action item because it's not on the agenda.
Can you call for another proposal?
Right, that's it. So it's not on the agenda. So that motion, if he wants a motion to continue, he can motion to continue the discussion, but you can't motion with an option.
Motion to continue the discussion and not kill this.
You can't bring another option
Correct.
forward right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's not on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the public comment and, okay.
Motion to continue, correct? Just to continue.
Motion to continue, yes. So we're continuing the dialogue. The committee's still going to have to work on bringing something back.
You could, but you could move to continue to bring back an option of
What I-
reducing the MCAG by 1 supervisor.
Or just other options.
How about not be specific, other options, counsel, legal counsel? What's the, I'm getting jammed up here. What do I?
So you could ask staff, pursuant to the agenda item request policy, to place an item on the next agenda to discuss another alternative. Then that direction would have to be given by a vote of the board at the time. So.
So didn't we already vote to not reduce the number of supervisors? So that can't come back.
No, we didn't vote officially. We had a discussion. It was a discussion. Never like an agenda item like this. I don't recall.
It was 9-2. It failed.
Not an agenda item with action on that.
I'll defer to.
There was an amendment that was proposed to reduce the number of supervisors to 3, and it was voted on and did fail. Specifically, of reducing it to 3.
To 3.
Yes.
Not by 1 to 4.
That was the actual draft amendment that was prepared and discussed in Dos Palos in November. That was the draft amendment, and I think you're right. It was to reduce from 5 to 3.
Yes, but I believe it was earlier. I think it was in September.
Yep. So then my motion still stands in.
I would second the motion to continue. Is that correct?
Continue and have him bring it back to reduce the board by 1 supervisor.
I would just like to see options. if that would be okay, not just a specific option.
I'll agree to amend it to that, to see options, including reducing the supervisors by 1. So there may be other options. The committee, who is the?
So your motion
Not
is
being on that
to
committee.
continue
You
with,
guys want it, you guys take it.
yeah, we've discussed.
But
this
we're
for
not
a long
wasting time here.
And we had a committee put together that the
guys
committee's
don't gotta
been
grab
meeting
it-
for
don't-
about 3 months.
Don't grab your toys and run away.
No, well, then you guys set your new committee up with the city folks. You guys come up with what you want exactly, and then you bring it back to the board. Because I told you, I gave it my honest effort right here. And then now it's just.
Your honest effort was to add Dos Palace and Gustine another seat. When Witten has 10,000 people, Delhi has 10,000 people.
You don't represent any of those people.
I know I don't, but it's like, let's
so-
have the honest discussion here. Don't get all upset because you're not getting your way.
So I have a motion and a second on the floor. The motion, but is your second in relevance to what he said?
The second is to bring forth other options.
But his is to reduce it by 1
I'll change, I'll
supervisor.
amend the motion to bring forward other options, as the mayor of Los Banos said.
Yeah, and I'll second that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
I just want to be clear. So when I hear bringing back this item to have on a future agenda for just this discussion to continue, or where would these other options come from? Because these options have been developed through the subcommittee, not from staff. So I just want to make sure that I'm not on a wild goose chase trying to hunt down other options.
I just had 2 subcommittee members resign. Pereira and Silvera just resigned, so I'll be on the subcommittee. I volunteer to be with, so we have 3, Murphy, Volta, and Creighton.
I volunteer too.
How many members can we have on this?
5.
There's 4.
That'd be 3 on 1.
You can have 5.
Chair?
So
We just need to replace.
You want to make it a standing committee per Brown Act?
That would be up to the board.
No.
Well, we have an option. I mean, we have the,
Motion to
We can have 5 on the committee.
we have a motion to continue the discussion. So let's go ahead and so I have a first and a second. Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, any more comments up here? Let's call for the vote. Roll call vote.
Wait,
If I could,
Yes.
I don't,
Director
so
Murphy.
having been in this process, I don't think it's fruitful or fair to put it on staff to just come back with
Right.
more options. I don't think that's fair.
I agree.
I think,
They brought options.
right, really it's up to
brought
us at this point, right? And we've had a subcommittee on it. But I do think that it deserves more discussion. I don't think that it's fair to just put it on staff to sort of solve this problem. I think, if we've got 2 members of the subcommittee that have resigned, then let's, fill them with other seats, and we've got people that are volunteering, and that way, these members that want to be released from the subcommittee can do that, and we can have a conversation separate from them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Call for the question. Let's go.
Call for the question. Yeah.
Continue.
Motion to continue.
Was a subcommittee or not?
with
Continue.
a motion to continue, we had 2 board members resign during the motion, so I want to make sure the committee's established back to its strength. Chair?
So do you want to state that for everybody to hear?
When this committee was established by the board, it was a specific purpose committee. It's not a standing committee of the board, so it does not continue in perpetuity. So this is essentially a motion to continue the committee and to continue to task it with the job.
Okay, but when you have somebody resign on the board, you just reappoint 2 other people.
But you have to decide whether the committee continues as a board, because that is up to the board. It does not continue in perpetuity without
Then
the approval of this board.
I'll pull my motion so that we could discuss the committee resignations, reappoint, and then I'll make the motion after that.
So, can I ask a question? Would it be that the motion should be that the committee's going to continue? And then we can, would that be it?
Yes, I think that is
Okay.
a more appropriate motion.
All right.
So I pulled my motion off, so if you want to.
I'd like to motion that the committee continue to function, and then we can talk about, see if that vote passes, then we can talk about membership.
The appointment of two.
Oh.
Those two resigned.
Yes, with the appointment. Do I have to say that? No. Okay.
The motion is to
Continue the committee.
continue the committee, and
Okay.
then you can discuss it further. At
All right. Okay.
Chair, I called for the question on the previous vote. Then all this stuff happens afterwards. I called for the question. So we're going to play games, doing all this other stuff. Let's follow the rules. I called for the question. It was set to go to a voice vote.
If you're going to have a tantrum, do it on the microphone so everyone can hear.
You don't have to.
No, it's fine. I'm frustrated with the whole process at this point. So I called for the question. I'd like for that vote to take place.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Well, because legal counsel was advising, that's how we had to pause, so we don't make any legal mistakes.
So the original motion was to continue with further discussions.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And let's see if that passes.
Let's call for the vote.
That's not what I asked for.
That's
not his original motion.
But his motion wasn't eligible as a motion. So let's go ahead and call for the vote. To continue for further discussion.
Director Aguilar?
Yes.
Director Creighton?
Yes.
Director Hoag?
No.
Director Lohr?
No.
Director Murphy?
Yes.
Director Oliveira?
No.
Director Pereira?
No.
Director Silvera?
No.
Director Vialta?
Yes.
Motion fails. Oh, Chair McDaniel?
No.
Motion fails.
6-9. Or 6-4. 6-4. Did I say 9? I added it, yeah. So now we'll move on to other reports. Item number 24, Executive Director's Report.
I'll just mention two critical things quickly, and that is that the next meeting will be in Los Banos on March 19th, and some of the topics that will be on the agenda will be the draft transit operations reserve policy for discussion, a draft work plan for the COG side of the transportation planning side of the house. That's essentially our budget. As we can recall, we're going to be highlighting each agency budget in its draft form, one board meeting at a time, rather than have a 4-hour budget workshop. And we'll have our One Voice platform on the agenda for action. And also, as was mentioned by Christine, some considerations of how, if we want to continue with the free fare programs, how we could continue to fund those. And then lastly, I sent a notice to let you know that we have implemented the attendance policy for the Measure V Citizens Oversight Committee, and those letters notifying of the vacancies due to absences have been sent out. So if it hasn't already, very shortly that press release for those vacancies and the applications will be distributed, and those applications have been updated to include the language notifying them and asking them to acknowledge the attendance policy and the implications of absences on that committee. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the Executive Director's Report? We'll move on to Director's Report. Any directors have anything they'd like to report out? Yes, Director Murphy.
Just want to mention the City of Merced had a town hall meeting last night. We're doing North, South, and Central Merced. Last night we were in Central Merced. In half an hour we'll be having a town hall meeting at Golden Valley High School. So members of the public are invited to attend. Our third town hall meeting will be next week at Crookshank Middle School on the 26th at 6 p.m.
Very good. Anything else?
Good luck to everybody running in the upcoming election.
That's true. Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
Well,